Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. The June morning settled heavy over Maple Grove Farm, as if even the air knew something was wrong. Eliza Harper stood at the window of the room that had been hers her entire life, watching the final preparations for a wedding she hadn't chosen. White chairs were arranged in perfect rows in the front garden, decorated with silk bows that cost more than her family could afford to spend. But it no longer mattered what they had or didn't have. "Eliza, you need to get ready." Beatrice's voice, her stepmother's, cut through the silence like a blade. "The dress is on the bed, and the makeup artist will be here in an hour." Eliza didn't turn around. Her fingers gripped the windowsill until her knuckles turned white. "I could still back out," she murmured, more to herself than to Beatrice. "Back out?" The bitter laugh echoed through the room. "Honey, there's nowhere to run. The papers have already been signed. The guests have arrived. And your father?" Beatrice paused deliberately. "Your father can't afford to keep the farm anymore. You know that." Eliza finally turned, and her green eyes met the hard face of the woman who had married her father when she was just a child. Beatrice had never pretended to love her, but today she wasn't even trying to hide the satisfaction in her dark eyes. "Why him?" Eliza asked, her voice coming out more fragile than she'd like. "Why Victor Langley?" "Because the Langley family has old ties with us, because they have the money we need, and because—" Beatrice stepped closer, adjusting a strand of Eliza's brown hair with fake tenderness. "You don't have a choice." The sound of tires on the gravel road announced the arrival of the first guests. Eliza felt her stomach turn when she recognized the black car, too elegant for these rural parts of Georgia. Victor Langley had arrived. She'd only seen him twice before. The first time, when their parents met to discuss the arrangement 3 months ago, he had sat in silence in the living room, his ice-blue eyes examining her as if she were property to be appraised. The second time was at the signing of the preliminary papers, when he spoke no more than 10 words during the entire meeting. "He's handsome. Admit it," Beatrice said, watching through the window as Victor got out of the car. "Many women would kill to be in your place." Eliza watched the man who would be her husband in a few hours walk toward the house. He was tall. His broad shoulders filled his dark suit perfectly. His black hair was impeccably styled, and even from a distance, she could see the rigid posture of someone used to controlling everything around him. Handsome, maybe. But there was something about Victor Langley that made her blood run cold. "Beauty doesn't pay the bills," Eliza murmured. "No, but his money does." Beatrice headed to the door, put on the dress. "In an hour, you'll be Mrs. Langley." Alone again, Eliza allowed herself a moment of weakness. Her legs trembled, and she sat on the edge of the bed where she had slept for 23 years. The wedding dress lay beside her. Simple white silk, elegant but without sparkle. As if even the clothes knew there was no love that day. She thought of her mother, Sophia, who had died when Eliza was only 12. Sophia Harper had been a woman of dreams, a pianist who had abandoned a promising career to live in the countryside, raise a family, and play only for the walls of Maple Grove Farm. In her final days, delirious with fever, Sophia had whispered names Eliza didn't recognize, talked about secrets and things a 12-year-old girl couldn't understand. "What would you do, Mom?" she asked quietly to the empty room. The sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs brought her back to reality. It was her father, Samuel Harper, climbing slowly, as if each step carried the weight of all his wrong choices. "Eliza?" He knocked gently on the door. "May I come in?" "Come in, Dad." Samuel Harper was a man who had once been strong, but recent years had bent his shoulders and carved deep lines into his face. When he entered the room, Eliza saw something in his eyes that scared her more than anything Beatrice had said. "Regret, my little girl," he began, his voice faltering. "I wish there was another way." "But there is, Dad. We can sell the farm. We can start over somewhere else." Samuel slowly shook his head. "It's not just the farm, Eliza. It's the debts. It's the loans I took, thinking things would get better. If I don't do this." He stepped closer, taking her hands between his, calloused from farm work. "They'll take everything. And you? You don't deserve to pay for my mistakes, but this marriage is making me pay for your mistakes, Dad." The words came out harsher than Eliza intended, and she saw her father recoil as if he'd been slapped. For a moment, the silence between them was so thick she could hear her own heart beating. "Victor Langley is a good man," Samuel finally said, but his voice carried no conviction. "He'll take care of you. He'll give you things I never could. And love, Dad? Who's going to give me that?" Samuel closed his eyes. And when he opened them again, they were moist. Sometimes love comes after. Eliza, your mother and I, we didn't start out in love, but we learned to love each other. Eliza knew it was a lie. She had seen the letters Sophia wrote to someone named Edward, letters she never sent but kept in a box under the bed. She had felt the sadness her mother carried like an invisible cloak, especially in her final years. He doesn't even know me, Dad, and I don't know him. How can it work out like this? Maybe that's better. Samuel replied, avoiding her eyes. No expectations, no complications. Outside, more cars were arriving. Eliza could hear voices, forced laughter, the sound of people preparing to witness a lie dressed as a celebration. I need to get ready, she said, standing up. Samuel hesitated at the door, as if he wanted to say something more, but finally he just murmured, Your mother would be proud of you. Before leaving, Eliza was alone with the wedding dress and the weight of a future she hadn't chosen. She walked to the old mirror in the corner of the room, the same mirror where her mother got ready every morning. For a moment, Eliza swore she saw Sophia's reflection beside her own, whispering something she couldn't understand. When she put on the dress, Eliza felt as if she were preparing for her own funeral. The cold silk against her skin gave her chills, and the pearls Beatrice insisted she wear seemed to weigh more than jewelry should. Outside, the music began to play. It was a string quartet that Beatrice had hired, playing a melancholic version of the wedding march. Through the window, Eliza could see Victor Langley waiting at the makeshift altar, hands clasped behind his back, his face a mask of absolute composure. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't anxious. He was just present, as if it were a business meeting, and maybe that's exactly what it was. Eliza walked down the stairs slowly, each step taking her further from the life she knew and closer to an uncertain future. Samuel waited for her at the bottom of the stairs, offering his arm with a sad smile. Ready? He asked. Eliza looked one last time at the house that had been her world for 23 years. The walls that had heard her childhood laughter, her teenage tears, her dreams whispered in the darkness. In a few hours, she would have another surname, another life, another identity. No, she whispered. But let's go ahead anyway. When the doors opened and Eliza began walking toward the altar, she met Victor Langley's blue eyes. For a split second, she thought she saw something there, surprise, perhaps, or even approval. But when she blinked, his expression had returned to its usual icy neutrality. There was no love in those eyes, no affection, just resignation. And when the pastor asked if she took Victor as her husband, Eliza answered, I do, with a steady voice, even knowing she was lying to God, to everyone present, and especially to herself. But what none of them knew was that this loveless marriage would plant the seeds of a passion so intense and forbidden that it would nearly destroy them all. The reception had ended 2 hours ago, but Eliza could still hear the echo of forced conversations and fake smiles ringing in her ears. Now, alone in the master bedroom of the Langley mansion, she watched through the panoramic window as the city lights spread like fallen stars in the darkness. The house was imposing, modern, cold, everything opposite to Maple Grove Farm, where she had grown up. The wedding dress was carefully hung in the closet like a ghostly reminder of a day that seemed to have lasted an eternity. Eliza had changed into a white silk nightgown that Beatrice had insisted she buy for the wedding night. She had said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her stiffen. Victor was coming. The door opened slowly, and he entered without making a sound. He had removed his jacket and tie, but still wore the white dress shirt with the first few buttons undone. His black hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had run his hands through it several times. I thought you'd already be asleep, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. I couldn't sleep. Eliza turned to face him, her nervous hands playing with the fabric of the nightgown. And you? Why did you take so long? Victor hesitated, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw a crack in his armor of composure. I was thinking about us, about what happened today. He approached slowly, as if she were a wild animal that might flee at any moment. Eliza, I know this isn't what you wanted. She almost laughed at the irony. And is it what you wanted, Victor? He stopped a few feet away from her, his blue eyes studying her face in the dim light of the room. I don't know what I want anymore, he admitted, and the raw honesty in his voice surprised her. The silence between them stretched, heavy with tension and unspoken expectations. Eliza could feel her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. Are you afraid of me? Victor asked, taking another step toward her. Should I be? No, the answer came quick, firm. Never. He was close enough now for her to feel the warmth radiating from his body, the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with something that was purely masculine. Eliza raised her eyes to meet his, and what she saw there made her shiver. It wasn't the usual coldness, but something deeper, more dangerous. Eliza. He murmured her name like it was a prayer. Yes, may I? May I touch you? The question caught her off guard. She had expected him to simply take what he considered his by marital right. But there he was, asking permission, as if she were something precious and fragile. She nodded, unable to find words. His hand rose slowly, fingers touching her cheek with a gentleness that contrasted brutally with the hardness she had seen in him during the day. The touch was warm, and Eliza instinctively closed her eyes. Leaning into the contact, "You're beautiful," he said, and there was something of surprise in his voice, as if he were discovering this for the first time. "Victor." His thumb traced the line of her jaw, moving down her neck. "Don't speak." "Not now." Eliza opened her eyes and found his fixed on hers, a burning intensity glowing in the blue depths. When he leaned down to kiss her, she didn't pull back. The kiss started hesitant, almost experimental, as if they were both testing unknown waters. But when Eliza responded, threading her fingers through his hair, something changed. The kiss deepened, became more urgent, more necessary. Victor's hands moved down her arms, outlined her waist, pulled her closer until there was no space between them. Eliza could feel his heart beating against her chest, as fast as her own. "Eliza," he murmured against her lips, and there was a desperation in his voice she hadn't expected. "What is it?" He pulled back slightly, studying her face. Have you been with anyone before?" The question made her blush violently. She lowered her eyes, suddenly aware of her inexperience, of how obvious she must be. "No," she whispered. The admission seemed to affect Victor in a way she couldn't decipher. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if fighting an internal battle. "Victor, does that matter?" "It matters because I don't want to hurt you." He opened his eyes, and she saw something she hadn't expected to find there. "Tenderness, because you deserve for this to be special." "And will it be special?" A sad smile touched his lips. "I don't know if I can promise that, but I can promise I'll be careful." When he kissed her again, it was with a gentleness that completely disarmed her. His hands explored with reverence, as if she were something sacred, and for a few precious moments, Eliza managed to forget that this marriage had been an arrangement, managed to pretend there was love in those caresses. He guided her to the bed with a patience she hadn't expected, whispering sweet words that made her heart race. When his hands found the ties of her nightgown, she trembled. "Are you sure?" he asked, even with his eyes dark with desire. "No," she answered honestly, "but do it anyway." What followed was a confusing mixture of pleasure and discomfort, of moments of genuine connection interspersed with the brutal reality that they were two strangers trying to create intimacy where none existed. Victor was careful, gentler than she had imagined he would be, but even so, when she whispered no, in a moment of unexpected pain, he hesitated for only a second before continuing. "It's all right," he murmured against her neck, the words more for himself than for her. "It's going to be all right." But Eliza wasn't sure if that was true. Afterward, they lay side by side in the darkness, sweat cooling on their skin, silence weighing between them like a third presence in the room. Eliza was turned to her side, pretending to sleep, but every fiber of her being was painfully aware of the man beside her. Victor was awake, too. She could tell by the tension in his body, by his irregular breathing. At one point, she felt his fingers lightly touch her hair, a gesture so tender it almost made her cry. "Eliza," he whispered, so low she almost didn't hear. She turned to face him, and in the faint light coming through the window, she saw something on his face that gave her hope for the first time that day. Vulnerability. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, his voice carrying a confession that seemed torn from his depths. "I don't know how to be a husband, how to be intimate with someone, and I don't know how to be a wife," she replied softly. He turned completely toward her, reaching out to touch her face. "Maybe we can learn together." For a moment, Eliza believed it might be possible. Maybe that unexpected tenderness, that vulnerability he had shown, was the beginning of something real. "Victor," she began, wanting to say something meaningful, something that could build a bridge between them, but he was already pulling away, getting up from the bed. "You should sleep," he said, his voice returning to the neutral tone. She knew, tomorrow will be a long day. Eliza sat up in bed, pulling the sheet to cover her body. "Will you stay?" Victor stopped in the middle of the room, his back to her. For a long moment, she thought he would say yes, that he would come back to bed and hold her hand until she fell asleep. "I have some work to finish," he said finally, already heading to the bathroom. "Good night, Eliza." "Good night," she murmured to the closing door. Eliza was left alone in the bed that still carried the warmth of both of them, his scent embedded in the sheets. She touched her lips, still tender from his kisses, and tried to understand what had happened. For a few moments, she had seen the man behind the cold mask. She had felt a genuine connection, a possibility of a future. But now, hearing the sound of the shower in the bathroom, she realized that maybe those moments of tenderness had been just an illusion. Maybe Victor Langley was exactly what she thought he was, a man who saw marriage as a contract and her as an obligation to be fulfilled. When she finally fell asleep hours later, it was with the feeling that something had begun and ended that same night. And when she woke up the next morning, the bed was empty beside her, as if Victor had never been there. On the nightstand, there was only a note. "Business trip. Back next week." Eliza held the paper with trembling hands, feeling something break inside her chest. He had left without saying goodbye, leaving her alone in a house that wasn't hers, with memories of a night she didn't know if it had been real or just a cruel dream. She didn't know yet that that night had planted more than doubts and disappointments in her heart. 3 weeks had passed since Victor left, and Eliza felt as if she were living in a ghost house. The Langley mansion was a maze of empty corridors and silent rooms, where her footsteps echoed like constant reminders of her loneliness. She had tried to establish a routine, walks in the elaborately maintained garden, reading in the luxurious library, attempts to talk with the housekeeper, Mrs. Grayson, who always responded with icy politeness. That July morning, Eliza woke up with a strange feeling in her stomach. It wasn't hunger. It was something different, an uneasiness that seemed to come from within. When she tried to eat the breakfast Mrs. Grayson had prepared, the smell of scrambled eggs made her run to the bathroom. "Mrs. Langley," the housekeeper's concerned voice came from the other side of the door. "Are you all right?" Eliza leaned against the sink, her pale face reflected in the golden mirror. "I'm fine, Mrs. Grayson. Must have been something I ate yesterday." But even as she said it, a terrible suspicion began to form in her mind. She counted the days since the wedding night, since Victor had touched her with that confused tenderness that now seemed to have happened in another lifetime. 2 weeks later, the suspicion became certainty. Eliza was sitting in Dr. Thompson's office, her hands trembling as he confirmed what she already knew deep in her heart. "Congratulations, Mrs. Langley. You're pregnant. About 6 weeks along." The words seemed to echo in the office like a distant sound. Eliza fixed her gaze on her hands folded in her lap, trying to process the information. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice coming out weaker than intended. "Absolutely. The blood test confirmed it." "Doctor." Thompson leaned forward, his kind face showing concern. "You don't seem happy about the news." Eliza forced a smile. It's a lot to process. My husband is traveling." "Ah, yes. Business, I imagine. Well, when he returns, I'm sure he'll be very happy." But Eliza wasn't so sure. Victor had left without a word, leaving only that cold note. How would he react to the news that the wife he barely knew was expecting a child? During the drive home, Eliza tried to imagine how she would share the news. Maybe when Victor returned, she would prepare a special dinner, find a romantic way to share the news. Maybe a baby could be the bridge they needed to build something real between them. But when she arrived home, she found Mrs. Grayson at the front door, her normally impassive face showing something Eliza had never seen before. Panic. "What happened?" Eliza asked, her heart racing. "There are reporters at the door, ma'am." "Many reporters." Eliza looked past the housekeeper and saw what she meant. A crowd of people with cameras and microphones clustered outside the property gates like vultures waiting for carrion. "Reporters? Why?" Mrs. Grayson handed her a newspaper, her face grave. "You'd better see for yourself." Eliza took the newspaper with trembling hands. The main headline hit her like a punch to the stomach. "Langley's Scandal. New wife strategically gets pregnant to secure fortune." Below it, a photo of her leaving Dr. Thompson's office, apparently taken from far away with a powerful lens. The article was a cruel and detailed speculation about how Eliza Harper had seduced Victor Langley into a quick marriage and was now using a pregnancy to secure access to the family fortune. A source close to the Langley family confirms that the young woman from a bankrupt rural family carefully planned the pregnancy to secure her financial position. One of the paragraphs read, "The convenient timing of the pregnancy, just 6 weeks after the wedding, raises questions about the true intentions of the new Mrs. Langley." Eliza felt her legs weaken. How did they find out? How do they know about the pregnancy? "I don't know, ma'am. But they've been there since early morning asking questions." Eliza's hands shook so much she could barely hold the newspaper. Someone had leaked confidential medical information. Someone had turned what should have been an intimate and private moment into a humiliating public spectacle. The phone rang shrill in the silence of the house. "Mrs. Grayson answered. "Langley Mansion?" "No." "She has no comment." "No, Mr. Langley is not available." The housekeeper hung up and turned to Eliza. "They want a statement. And what should I say?" Eliza asked, her voice coming out bitter. "That I didn't plan this. That I barely know my own husband." The sound of tires on the road interrupted her. Eliza ran to the window and saw Victor's familiar black car driving through the gates, passing the reporters who shouted questions and took photos. He was back. Eliza ran down the stairs, her heart beating erratically. Maybe he would believe her. Maybe when she explained that she hadn't planned anything, that the pregnancy had been as much a surprise to her as it would be to him. The front door burst open, and Victor entered like a hurricane. His blue eyes were icy, colder than Eliza had ever seen them. He was holding a copy of the same newspaper she had in her hands. "Victor, I can explain." "Explain?" He laughed, a humorless sound. "What exactly are you going to explain, Eliza? How you planned this from the beginning?" "I didn't plan anything. You have to believe me." "Believe you?" Victor approached, and Eliza instinctively backed away. "You want me to believe it's a coincidence that you got pregnant by chance right on the first night?" "It was on the first night. It was the only night. You know that." "Do I really?" His eyes pierced her like ice. "You seemed very experienced for someone who claimed to be a virgin." The accusation hit her like a slap. Eliza felt tears burning her eyes. "How can you say that? You were there. You know I never. I know you came from a bankrupt family. I know you desperately needed money. And I know that now, conveniently, you're pregnant and financially secure for the rest of your life." "Victor, please." Eliza reached out to him, but he pulled away as if her touch were poisonous. "Very well calculated, I have to admit. Marry me. Seduce me on the wedding night. Get pregnant immediately. Now you have access to the Langley fortune forever. I didn't seduce you. You were the one who." Eliza stopped, realizing how her words might sound. "Victor, you know it wasn't like that, do I?" He threw the newspaper on the coffee table, the pages scattering. "Because all I know is that I married a stranger who apparently is much smarter than I imagined." Eliza felt something break definitively inside her. The pain of betrayal, of mistrust, was worse than any physical pain she had ever felt. "Do you really believe I would do this?" she asked, her voice coming out as a whisper. "That I would plan to get pregnant by a man who barely knows me, who left the next day without a word?" Something flickered in Victor's eyes. Maybe doubt, maybe regret, but it lasted only a second before the cold mask returned to its place. "I believe in facts, and the facts are that you're pregnant. You need money, and now you have access to both." Eliza straightened up, wiping the tears from her face with the back of her hand. Something had changed inside her. The pain was transforming into anger, into determination. "You want facts, Victor? Here's a fact. I was a virgin. I can prove that." "How?" "Medical exams. Dr. Thompson can confirm it. There's physical evidence that proves that was my first time." For the first time since he had arrived, Victor hesitated. The certainty in his eyes wavered. "And here's another fact," Eliza continued, her voice gaining strength. "I don't need your money. Not like this. Not being publicly humiliated, not being accused of being an opportunist." "Elisa, no." She raised her hand, interrupting him. "You chose to believe strangers instead of believing the woman who married you. You chose to assume the worst about me without even giving me a chance to explain." Eliza headed toward the stairs, then stopped and turned to face him one last time. "You want to know the truth, Victor? I was happy about the pregnancy. For one stupid moment, I thought maybe a baby could give us a chance to build something real. I thought maybe you'd be happy, too." She saw something break in his face, a crack in the cold armor. "But I was wrong. You never wanted a wife or a family. You wanted a contract. Well, consider the contract broken." Eliza climbed the stairs without looking back. Each step a declaration of war against the man who had broken her heart into pieces. She didn't know yet that someone had carefully orchestrated that destruction, that envious eyes had watched every move, waiting for the perfect moment to plant the seeds of mistrust. But one thing she knew for sure. She wouldn't stay in a house where she was seen as an opportunist, where her child would be considered a strategic mistake. It was time to leave. And this time, she wouldn't look back. The monastery of St. Mary rose against Virginia's gray sky like a beacon of ancient stone, its Gothic towers piercing the low clouds that promised rain. Eliza gripped tightly the handle of the only suitcase she had brought, her fingers white from clutching the worn leather so hard. The cold October wind carried the scent of dry leaves and something else, incense perhaps, or just the indefinable fragrance of centuries of prayers. "Are you sure you want to stay here?" asked the taxi driver, looking at the monastery's high walls through the fogged windshield. "It's pretty isolated." "That's exactly what I need," Eliza replied, handing him the fare money. Her voice was hoarse from crying so much during the past 2 weeks, since she had left the Langley mansion. The heavy wooden door opened before she could even knock. A middle-aged woman, wearing a simple brown habit, smiled at her with kind eyes that seemed to see right through her defenses. "Eliza Harper," said the nun, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. "I'm Sister Margaret. We were expecting you." "Langley," Eliza corrected automatically, then hesitated. "Actually, I don't know what my name is anymore." Sister Margaret reached out to take her suitcase. "In here, you can simply be Eliza. Names carry weight. And sometimes we need to let go of the weight to find who we really are." The monastery's interior was a contradiction of simplicity and grandeur. The stone corridors echoed their footsteps like whispers from past generations. But there was a palpable peace in the air that Eliza hadn't felt in months. Stained glass windows cast soft rainbows on the walls, and the distant sound of female voices singing created an ethereal symphony. "You can stay as long as you need," said Margaret as they walked. "We don't ask questions here. We just offer silence when needed, and conversation when desired. And what if I don't know which one I need?" "Then you'll stay until you figure it out." The room assigned to her was Spartan but comfortable. A simple bed, a dark wooden table, a chair, and a window that looked out onto an inner garden where other women walked in contemplative silence. Eliza placed her suitcase on the bed and sat beside it, finally allowing exhaustion to take over. For the first time in weeks, she placed her hand on her still flat belly where her child was growing. "We're safe now," she whispered to the baby who couldn't hear her yet. At least for now, the first days at the monastery passed in a comforting fog of routine. Eliza participated in morning prayers, even though she wasn't particularly religious, because there was something hypnotic about the voices united in chants that calmed the storm in her mind. She worked in the garden in the mornings, her hands in the damp earth connecting her with something primitive and healing. But it was the afternoons that transformed her. "Do you play piano?" asked Sister Margaret at the end of her first week, finding Eliza standing at the chapel door, watching the grand piano that occupied a corner near the altar. "My mother taught me," Eliza replied, her fingers tingling with memory. "But it's been years since I played. Hands never forget what the heart learned." "Go ahead." Eliza approached the instrument as if it were a wild animal that might flee. The bench was at the perfect height, and when she lifted the lid that protected the keys, a familiar aroma hit her. Polished wood and the almost imperceptible scent of hundreds of hands that had touched those same keys. Her fingers found the keys hesitantly, pressing some notes at random. The sound echoed through the chapel, pure and crystalline. "My mother used to say that the piano was a confession," Eliza murmured, beginning to play a simple melody her mother had taught her as a child, that it revealed truths that words couldn't express. "And what is your piano confessing now?" asked Sister Margaret, sitting on one of the nearby benches. Eliza closed her eyes and let her fingers find their own music, a melancholic melody that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her soul. "That I'm lost, that I'm afraid, that I don't know if I'm strong enough to raise a child alone. And yet you're here. Yet you chose to stay. I had no choice." "We always have a choice, Eliza. The question is whether we have the courage to make the difficult choices." That night, alone in her room, Eliza found herself thinking about her mother for the first time in years without it being accompanied by pain. Sophia Harper had been a woman of mysteries, talented, melancholic, always carrying secrets she never shared. "Mom," Eliza whispered to the darkness, "did you know I would end up here? Did you know I would need to learn to be strong?" It was in the second week that the discovery happened. Eliza was organizing old sheet music in the chapel when she found a forgotten folder underneath the piano. The music sheets were yellowed with time, and when she opened the first page, her heart stopped. "Compositions by Sophia Santos Harper" was written in elegant handwriting she recognized immediately. "Sister Margaret," Eliza called, her voice echoing through the chapel. "Sister Margaret, come here." The nun came running, concern written on her face. "What happened? These sheet music, they're my mother's. How did they get here?" Sister Margaret approached, examining the sheets carefully. Sophia Harper, that name sounds familiar. She frowned, searching her memory. "Wait here." She returned minutes later with an old record book, the yellowed pages creaking as she leafed through them. "Here," she said, pointing to an entry from 25 years ago. "Sophia Santos Harper was here for 3 months in 1999. She was pregnant, and oh, what it says here, that she came seeking refuge during a personal crisis. That she left these compositions as a donation when she departed." Sister Margaret looked up at Eliza. "Were you born in 2000? "Born in March 2000. Eliza felt her legs weaken. "She was pregnant with me when she was here." "It seems so, and there's more." Sister Margaret turned a few pages. She talked a lot about a man named Edward. She said she loved him, but that they couldn't be together. The name hit Eliza like lightning. Edward. She had heard that name before, whispered in her mother's feverish delirium during her final days. Edward who? She never said the last name, but Sister Margaret hesitated. There was something about him being married, about a powerful family that would never accept them together. Eliza sat heavily on the piano bench. The sheet music scattered around her like pieces of a puzzle she was just beginning to assemble. "She was running away," Eliza murmured, "just like me." "Sometimes daughters repeat their mother's paths," said Sister Margaret gently, "but that doesn't mean they have to have the same destiny." That night, Eliza stayed up late reading her mother's compositions. There was pain in those notes, but also hope, and on the last page, written in Sophia's delicate handwriting, there was a message that made Eliza's heart race. "For my daughter, who will one day understand that true love is worth any sacrifice, may she be braver than I was. May she fight for what is rightfully hers. Reveal the truth. One day she will know, too." S. Eliza held the page with trembling hands. Her mother had left clues, coded messages about a past Eliza had never known. Edward knew the truth about what? What truth was this that her mother had taken to her grave? She placed her hands on her belly, where her child was growing, and made a silent promise. "I'm going to find out, Mom. I'm going to discover what secrets you carried. And I'm going to make sure my child never has to grow up without knowing their own history." Outside, the wind howled through the monastery's ancient trees, carrying whispers of buried secrets and truths waiting to be discovered. Eliza didn't know yet that her search for answers about her mother's past would lead her back to the future she had left behind. But first, she needed to become strong enough to face whatever truth she found. 3 weeks had passed since Eliza found her mother's sheet music, and she couldn't stop thinking about the name Edward. Every morning after prayers, she would sit at the piano and play Sophia's compositions. As if the melodies could reveal secrets that words couldn't express, there was something familiar in those harmonies, something that stirred memories she didn't know she possessed. "You're different," observed Sister Margaret that November morning. Finding Eliza in the garden, where she usually spent her afternoons, the cold was more intense, and Eliza pulled the wool shawl tighter around her shoulders, instinctively protecting her belly that was beginning to show the first signs of pregnancy. Different, how? More determined, like someone who found a purpose. The nun sat beside her on the stone bench, the brown habit contrasting with the golden leaves covering the ground. "You're going to look for answers about your mother, aren't you?" Eliza nodded, watching a group of novices walking silently through the cloister. "I need to know who Edward was. I need to understand why my mother carried so many secrets. And what if the answers aren't what you expect? Then at least I'll know the truth." That afternoon, Eliza was in the monastery library, leafing through old newspapers from Virginia and Georgia, looking for any mention of the name Edward that could connect with her mother when she heard heavy footsteps in the stone corridors. They were masculine footsteps, strange in that predominantly feminine environment. "Sister Margaret, is there someone named Eliza Harper here?" The male voice echoed through the ancient walls, and Eliza felt her blood freeze. She recognized that voice, deep, authoritative, but different from Victor's coldness. This one had a more sinister quality. "May I ask who wants to know?" came Sister Margaret's polite but firm reply. "I'm Leonard Langley, Victor Langley's brother. It's about an urgent family matter." Eliza quickly closed the books, her heart racing. Leonard Langley. She had heard Victor mention his half-brother a few times, always in a neutral tone that didn't reveal much about their relationship. "One moment, please." said Sister Margaret. Minutes later, the nun appeared in the library, her face worried. There's a man asking for you. Says he's your brother-in-law. I heard. Eliza stood up, smoothing the simple dress she wore. What does he want? Didn't say. But Sister Margaret hesitated. There's something about him I don't like. Maybe you should stay here. I can say you're not in. Eliza considered the suggestion, but her curiosity was stronger than caution. No, I want to know what he has to say, but can you stay present? Of course. Leonard Langley was waiting in the small parlor where the monastery received visitors. When Eliza entered, he stood up, and she could study him for the first time. He was shorter than Victor, with brown hair and dark eyes that seemed to calculate every movement. There was a superficial resemblance between the brothers, but where Victor had an imposing presence, Leonard emanated something that made Eliza feel uncomfortable. Eliza, he said, extending his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Finally, we meet in person. Leonard Langley. Mr. Langley. Eliza briefly shook his hand, noticing how his fingers were cold and damp. What brings you here? Family concern, of course. Leonard sat down without being invited, crossing his legs with calculated ease. When we learned that you had left Victor, we were all very worried, all my mother, Evelyn, and I. Victor is well. He's devastated, naturally. Eliza doubted that, but kept her expression neutral, and we thought maybe there had been a misunderstanding. Those stories in the press. Leonard shook his head with false sympathy. Very unfortunate. Very unfair to you. You think so? Of course. An innocent young woman from a traditional family being accused of, well, terrible things. Leonard leaned forward, his dark eyes fixed on hers. Actually, I came here to offer a solution. Sister Margaret, who was sitting discreetly in the corner of the parlor, moved slightly, and Eliza noticed she was also uncomfortable with Leonard's presence. What kind of solution? Well, the matter is complicated by your current condition. Leonard's eyes dropped to Eliza's belly, and she instinctively pulled the shawl to cover herself. A child makes everything more complex. More complex how? Leonard sighed dramatically. Eliza, may I be frank with you, please? The Langley family has a reputation to maintain, businesses to protect, and the presence of a child, especially a child whose paternity has been publicly questioned. He left the sentence hanging. Eliza felt anger rising like a hot wave. The paternity wasn't questioned. I know exactly who the father is. Of course. But the public, well, the public has its own ideas. Leonard stood up and began walking around the small parlor. That's why I came here with a proposal. I'm listening. A financial agreement. Generous. Enough for you and the child to live comfortably for the rest of your lives. In exchange, you would sign some papers waiving any rights to the Langley inheritance. The silence in the parlor was thick as fog. Eliza could hear the ticking of an old clock on the wall and the distant sound of evening prayers. What rights? She finally asked. Well, technically, as Victor's wife, you have certain rights over family property. And the child Leonard stopped walking and stared directly at her. The child would be considered an heir to the Langley fortune. And you want me to give that up? For fair compensation? Yes. Eliza stood up, walking to the window that looked out onto the monastery garden. Outside, trees swayed in the cold wind, and she could see other women walking through the outer corridors, their figures wrapped in shawls and peace. Why are you really here, Leonard? I said no. Eliza turned to face him. Why you? Why not Victor? Why not this Evelyn you mentioned? Something changed in Leonard's face. An almost imperceptible hardening. Victor is busy with business, and my mother thought it best that I come. Or maybe, Eliza said slowly, you have your own reasons for wanting me to disappear. I don't know what you're talking about, don't you? Eliza took a step toward him. You wouldn't know anything about how that information about my pregnancy got to the newspapers, would you? Leonard laughed, but there was nervousness in the laughter. Eliza, you're being paranoid. Why would I do something like that? Because you're afraid. Afraid of what? Eliza was operating on instinct now, following an intuition that came from somewhere deep, afraid that I'll discover something about the Langley family that you prefer to keep buried. You're delusional. Am I? Eliza moved closer, watching how Leonard backed away slightly. Let me ask you something, Leonard. Did you know a woman named Sophia Harper or Sophia Santos? The reaction was instant and revealing. Leonard's face paled, and his eyes widened for a split second before he composed himself. Never heard that name. But it was too late. Eliza had seen the truth flashing in his eyes. Liar, she whispered. Leonard quickly headed for the door. "You're making a mistake, Eliza. A very big mistake." "What kind of mistake?" He stopped at the door, turning to her one last time. When he spoke, his voice had lost all pretense of cordiality. "The kind of mistake that can be dangerous for you and for the child." His eyes fixed on her belly again. "Bad things happen to people who ask too many questions about the Langley family. Ask your mother." "Oh, wait. You can't, can you?" The implicit threat in the last sentence made Eliza's blood freeze, but before she could respond, Leonard was gone, leaving only the echo of his footsteps and the smell of expensive, sickening cologne. Sister Margaret quickly approached. "Eliza, are you all right? You're pale." "He knew my mother," Eliza murmured, still looking at the door where Leonard had left. "And there's something he doesn't want me to discover." "What will you do?" Eliza placed her hands on her belly, feeling for the first time the gentle movements of her child. Outside, the monastery bells began to ring, calling for evening prayers. "I'm going to find out the truth about my mother, about Edward, and about why Leonard Langley is so desperate to keep me away from the family." She turned to Sister Margaret, her green eyes blazing with a determination that hadn't been there before, "Even if it means going back to the place I ran from." But she didn't know yet that the truth she was about to discover would change everything she thought she knew about herself, about her family, and about the man she had left behind. Leonard's visit had planted seeds of unrest that grew like weeds in Eliza's mind. 2 weeks had passed since that disturbing encounter, and she couldn't forget the change in his eyes when she mentioned her mother's name. There was recognition there, fear perhaps, and something darker, guilt. Eliza was in the monastery library again, surrounded by piles of old newspapers and records that Sister Margaret had obtained from local archives. Her fingers traced names in obituary lists, looking for any connection between Sophia Santos and the Langley family. The smell of old paper and faded ink had become familiar, almost comforting. Sophia Santos Harper, pianist, died at 35 after brief illness. She read aloud, finding her mother's obituary for the 10th time. Survived by husband Samuel Harper and daughter Eliza, 12. Brief illness. Eliza had always known there was something strange about her mother's sudden death. Sophia had been healthy, full of life, and then within weeks she had withered like a cut flower. The sound of hurried footsteps in the corridor made her look up. Sister Margaret appeared at the door, holding a white envelope. "This came for you," said the nun, extending the envelope with a worried expression. It was delivered by a messenger. Eliza took the envelope, noticing there was no return address, just her name written in careful block letters. When she opened it, she found a single sheet of paper and a small golden key. "If you want answers about your mother, find box 247 at First National Bank in Atlanta. The truth is waiting. A friend." Eliza held the golden key up to the light. It was small, old, with engraved numbers that matched the number mentioned in the letter. "Who could have sent this?" she murmured. "Someone who knows you. Someone who knew your mother." Sister Margaret sat beside her. "The question is whether you can trust this person." Eliza put the key in her dress pocket, feeling the cold metal against her fingers. "There's only one way to find out." 2 hours later, she was at the bank in Atlanta, her heart beating fast as she followed an employee to the safe deposit boxes. The golden key trembled in her hand as she inserted it into the lock of box 247. "Are you sure this is your key, ma'am?" asked the employee, noticing her nervousness. "I am," Eliza lied, turning the key until she heard the soft click of the lock opening. Alone in the small private room, Eliza opened the box with trembling hands. Inside there was a brown leather folder, some jewelry she recognized as having belonged to her mother, and a thick sealed envelope with her name. She opened the envelope first. The handwriting was her mother's, but shakier, as if it had been written in haste or pain. "My dear Eliza, if you are reading this, it means you discovered what I always feared you would discover. Edward Langley, yes, Langley is your biological father. Samuel Harper is a good man who agreed to raise you as his own daughter, but you deserve to know the truth about your origins. Edward and I loved each other deeply, but he was married to Evelyn, a cruel woman who would have destroyed our lives if she knew the truth. When I discovered I was pregnant, Edward wanted to leave everything to be with us, but I couldn't allow it. I couldn't destroy his family, even if it meant sacrificing our happiness. He left a secret will recognizing you as his daughter and ensuring an inheritance. Evelyn doesn't know this, nor does Leonard, her son from a previous marriage. If they find out, you will be in danger. Be careful, my daughter. There are secrets in the Langley family that have cost lives. With all my love, Sophia." Eliza had to lean against the chair, the paper trembling in her hands. "Edward Langley, Victor's father, her biological father. That meant, oh God, she whispered, the realization hitting her like lightning. Victor is my half-brother. The leather folder contained legal documents, certificates, secretly conducted DNA tests, and a copy of Edward Langley's will. Eliza read quickly, her eyes widening with each line. I leave to Eliza Santos Harper, my daughter, recognized by paternity test attached, 30% of the shares of Langley Enterprises and the property known as Maple Grove Farm. Eliza stopped reading, her head spinning. Maple Grove. The farm where she had grown up. Edward had secretly bought the property and left it for Sophia's husband to manage, ensuring Eliza grew up in a stable home. There was more. Photos of Edward and Sophia together, smiling, clearly in love. An alternative birth certificate with Edward's name as father. And at the bottom of the folder, a recording on an old microcassette. Eliza picked up the small recorder that was in the box and inserted the tape with trembling fingers. Her mother's voice filled the small room, weaker than in her memories. But unmistakably, Sophia, Eliza, if you're hearing this, it's because something happened to me. I need you to know that Edward had no choice. Evelyn found out about us, about you. She threatened me, said she would kill you if I didn't get out of Edward's life forever. Eliza held the recorder closer, tears blurring her vision. I accepted, but Edward made the secret will. He wanted to make sure you would be taken care of. Evelyn doesn't know about the will, but she suspects, if something happens to me, Eliza, it wasn't an accident. Evelyn is capable of... The recording cut off abruptly, leaving only static buzz. Eliza rewound and listened again, each word engraving itself in her memory like red-hot iron. Her mother had been threatened, possibly murdered. And she, Eliza, was married to her own half-brother. The safe deposit box phone rang. Startling her, it was the bank employee. Mrs. Harper, there's someone here asking for you. Says it's urgent. Who is it? A Mr. Leonard Langley. Eliza's blood froze. How had Leonard discovered where she was? Tell him I'm not here, she whispered quickly. Tell him you never saw me. But ma'am, please, it's a matter of life and death. Eliza quickly put all the documents back in the folder, her mind racing. Leonard must have had someone follow her, or maybe the friend who had sent the key was a trap. She waited 30 minutes before leaving, using a side exit the employee showed her. During the entire drive back to the monastery, she checked the rear-view mirrors, looking for cars that might be following. Back in her room at the monastery, Eliza spread the documents on the small bed. The truth was there in black and white. But it was a truth that changed everything. If she was Edward Langley's daughter, then Victor was her half-brother. The marriage was incestuous, even though neither of them knew it, and the baby Eliza placed her hands on her belly where her child was growing, the child of half-siblings. What genetic complications could this cause? But there was something more disturbing. If Leonard found out about the will, about her true parentage, he would do anything to prevent her from claiming the inheritance, including... The sound of gravel on the road interrupted her thoughts. Eliza ran to the window and saw a familiar black car parking at the monastery entrance. Leonard had found her. She quickly hid the documents under the mattress and ran down the stairs. Leonard was in the parlor again, but this time there was something different about him. An urgency, a dangerous energy. Eliza, he said when she entered, not getting up. This time, what a coincidence finding you here again. What do you want, Leonard? You went to Atlanta today to the bank. It wasn't a question. Eliza kept her expression neutral, even with her heart racing. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. Leonard stood up, approaching her. You found his safe deposit box, didn't you? Found Edward's documents. What documents? Leonard laughed. A humorless sound. The documents that prove you're my stepfather's bastard daughter, the documents that give you rights to an inheritance that should be mine. The raw admission betrayed him. Eliza took a step back. You knew all along. You knew who I was. Of course I knew. Why do you think it was so easy to convince Victor to marry you? Why do you think the arrangement between the families was set up? What do you mean? Leonard smiled. And there was something predatory in that expression. I planned it all, Eliza. The marriage was my idea. Marrying you to Victor would ensure you could never claim the inheritance as Edward's daughter. After all, wives of legitimate sons have no rights to their father-in-law's inheritance. You knew we were half-siblings. I hoped you would never find out. And it would have worked if you weren't so curious. Leonard moved closer. But now you know too much, and that's a problem. Eliza looked around for Sister Margaret, but the parlor was empty except for the two of them. It was you, she whispered. the pieces finally falling into place. You leaked the information about my pregnancy to the press. You wanted to separate us. Very clever. Yes, it was me. I needed you two away from each other before you discovered the truth about the relationship. The public scandal was perfect, and my mother, she said in the recording, that Evelyn threatened her. Leonard's smile grew wider and infinitely more cruel. Ah, you found the recording. What a sentimental touch from old Edward. Leonard, was it you who killed my mother? I was just a boy when your mother died, Eliza. But he paused, savoring the moment. Let's say I learned a lot watching my mother work. The confirmation hit her like a punch. Evelyn had murdered Sophia, and Leonard had learned from her. What do you want? Eliza asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Simple. You're going to renounce any rights to the Langley inheritance. You're going to sign the papers I brought, and you're going to disappear. He put his hand in his coat pocket. Forever. And if I refuse? Leonard took his hand out of his pocket, revealing a small syringe. Then you'll have the same fate as your mother, and unfortunately, accidents happen to pregnant women all the time. Eliza felt cold fear run through her veins, but along with it came something stronger. Anger. Anger for her mother, for herself, for the innocent child she carried. You won't get away with this, she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her own voice. Oh, but I will. Just like my mother got away with it all these years. Leonard took another step toward her, the syringe gleaming in the dim light of the parlor. But he had made a mistake. He had confessed too much, revealed too many truths, and Eliza had recorded everything on the small device she carried hidden in her pocket. Victor Langley sat in his Manhattan office, his 10th cup of morning coffee cooling on the desk, while he stared at the divorce papers Leonard had left for him to sign. 3 months had passed since Eliza left, and each day seemed longer than the last. The apartment was too quiet, the bed too cold, and his own reflection in the mirror accused him every morning. Maybe she really did plan it all, he murmured to himself, but the words sounded empty, even to his own ears. In recent days, fragments of memories from the wedding night came back to haunt him, the genuine surprise in Eliza's eyes, the way she had whispered no, with an innocence he now recognized as fear, not manipulation. The intercom on his desk buzzed. Mr. Langley, there's a detective here to see you, says it's about your wife. Victor felt his stomach sink. Send him in. The man who entered was older, graying, with eyes that had seen too much. Mr. Langley. I'm Detective Robert Sullivan. I need to ask some questions about Eliza Harper. Langley. Is she okay? The question came out more urgent than Victor intended. For now, but there are some things you need to know. May I sit? Victor gestured to the chair. What's this about? Sullivan opened a thick folder, taking out several photographs. These were taken yesterday at the Monastery of St. Mary in Virginia. Your wife was being threatened by your half-brother, Leonard Langley. The photograph showed Eliza in the monastery parlor, Leonard approaching her with something in his hand. Even in the grainy quality of the images, Victor could see the fear on his wife's face. Leonard was there. Why? That's a long story, Mr. Langley, and I'm sure you're not going to like what I'm about to tell you. Sullivan leaned forward. Your wife hired me to investigate her mother's death. What we found? Well, it changes everything. Victor felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of changes? Sullivan took a digital recorder from the folder. Your wife managed to record a confession from Leonard. Do you want to hear it? With trembling fingers, Victor pressed play. Leonard's voice filled the office, cold and calculating, confessing about the leak to the press, about the plan to separate Victor and Eliza, about I planned it all, Eliza. The marriage was my idea. Marrying you to Victor. Victor paused the recording, his face losing all color. Edward's daughter, my father's. Keep listening, Sullivan said gently. The recording continued, revealing the secret will, the truth about Eliza's parentage, Evelyn's threats to Sophia years before. When it got to the part where Leonard admitted to learning assassination techniques from his mother, Victor forcefully turned off the device. This can't be true. I'm afraid it is. We did our own investigation after your wife contacted us. The will is real. The DNA tests Edward secretly conducted are authentic. Eliza Harper is your father's biological daughter. Victor stood up abruptly, walking to the panoramic window overlooking the city. Outside, life continued normally. People walking on sidewalks, cars passing by. But inside that office, his world was crumbling. That means Eliza and I are half-siblings. Yes, the marriage was technically incestuous, although neither of you knew it. And the baby? Sullivan hesitated. That's something you'll need to discuss with specialist doctors. But Mr. Langley, there's something more urgent. Victor turned around. What? Leonard knows Eliza has the evidence. She's in real danger. The recording we just heard was made yesterday. Leonard threatened her with a syringe, probably containing the same substance that killed her mother. Where is she now? Under protection at the monastery. But we don't know how long that will be enough. Victor was already grabbing his coat. Let's go there. Mr. Langley. Wait, there's more. More what? Sullivan took a series of documents from the folder. While investigating Leonard, we discovered other things. Your stepmother, Evelyn, isn't just a murderer. She's been trying to poison you for years. That's ridiculous. Do you remember that flu that lasted weeks when you were 25? Or that food poisoning that almost killed you at 30? Victor remembered. 2 mysterious episodes where he had become gravely ill without medical explanation. We found evidence that Evelyn was administering small doses of poison in your food, calculated doses to look like natural illnesses, but that would have eventually killed you. Why? Because you were the only legitimate heir standing between her and the complete family fortune. With you dead, Leonard would inherit everything. Victor sat heavily in the chair, his head spinning. My own family is trying to kill me. There's more. Leonard forged the DNA tests that proved you and Eliza were blood siblings. He wanted you to discover the relationship in the worst possible way to ensure you separated permanently. But she really is my half-sister. Yes, but Leonard manipulated the situation. He knew that if you truly loved each other, the revelation of the relationship would destroy you. It was a cruel psychological move. Victor thought about the wedding night. The unexpected tenderness he had felt for Eliza. The connection that had been born between them. Leonard had destroyed that before it could even bloom. I need to see her, he said, standing up again. I need to explain that I didn't know any of this. Mr. Langley, she knows you were manipulated just as much as she was. But there's another complication. What? Sullivan took out a final series of documents. Leonard isn't acting alone anymore. Evelyn found out about the will. They're planning to kill Eliza and make it look like an accident. We have information that they're already on their way to the monastery. Victor's blood froze. When? Now. Victor grabbed his car keys, already running toward the door. Call the police. Call everyone you can. I'm going there. It's a trap. Mr. Langley, they expect you to show up. But Victor was already in the elevator. Adrenaline coursing through his veins. For the first time in months, his mind was crystal clear. Eliza was in danger. The woman he had unjustly accused, whom he had rejected when she needed him most, was being hunted by people he had considered family. During the entire 3-hour drive to Virginia, Victor relived every moment since the wedding. The coldness he had shown Eliza, the way he had believed Leonard's lies without question, the cruelty of his accusations when she was pregnant and vulnerable. He had failed her in every possible way. He had been the husband Samuel Harper feared he would be. Cold. Distrustful. Unable to protect the woman he had promised to love and honor. But there was something deeper he now recognized. That wedding night when he had let his guard down and allowed Eliza to see his vulnerability, he had felt something he had never experienced before. It wasn't just attraction or desire. It was a genuine connection, a sense of completeness that had scared him so much he had fled the next morning. Now, driving through the night toward the monastery, Victor finally admitted to himself the truth he had denied for months. He was in love with Eliza, desperately, completely in love, and she was in danger because of his own family. When he spotted the monastery's Gothic towers against the night sky, he could see strange lights, too much movement for a place that should be in contemplative silence. His heart raced when he realized it might already be too late. He stopped the car at a safe distance and picked up his phone to call Sullivan, but the call went straight to voicemail. There was no time to wait for backup. Eliza was in there, probably terrified, possibly already hurt, and for the first time in his life, Victor Langley was ready to fight for something that truly mattered, even if it meant confronting the demons of his own family. He just hoped he wasn't arriving too late to save the woman he should have protected from day one. Eliza was hidden in the highest tower of the monastery, her hands trembling as she held the cell phone Sister Margaret had lent her. Below, she could hear voices. Leonard and an older woman who could only be Evelyn. They had arrived an hour ago, claiming to be concerned family coming to get Eliza, but Sister Margaret hadn't believed them. Are you sure you want me to allow these people in? The nun had asked through Eliza's room door. There's something about them that makes me uneasy. Don't let them in, Eliza had whispered. Please, they didn't come here to help me. Now, Hidden in the tower, Eliza could hear fragments of the conversation below. Leonard was getting impatient, his voice rising. "We know she's here. We don't have time for games." The female voice that responded was refined, polite, but there was a coldness in it that made Eliza's blood freeze. "Leonard, dear, calm down. These religious people respond better to kindness." Evelyn Langley. The woman who had killed her mother. Eliza dialed the number Detective Sullivan had given her, but the call went straight to voicemail. Where were the police? Where was the protection he had promised? A new sound from outside made her run to the tower window. Car headlights cut through the darkness, climbing the narrow road that led to the monastery. Her heart jumped when she recognized the black car. The same one Victor drove. "Victor," she whispered. A mixture of relief and terror running through her veins. He had come, but now he was also in danger. Below, she heard Leonard curse. "Victor's here. This complicates things. Actually, dear, it simplifies them." Evelyn's voice sounded almost cheerful. "Now we can solve all our problems at once." Eliza descended the tower stairs as quietly as possible, her bare feet making no sound on the cold stone. She needed to warn Victor. She needed to. The pain that shot through her was sudden and intense, like a knife cutting through her abdomen. Eliza leaned against the stone wall, gasping, one hand instinctively going to her 6-month belly. "No," she whispered. "Not now." But another pain came, stronger than the first, and Eliza felt something wet running down her legs. When she looked down, she saw blood. "Oh, God," she moaned, sliding down the wall until she was sitting on the cold floor. Outside, she heard the car door slam, heavy footsteps on the main stairs. Victor's voice echoed through the thick walls. "Leonard." "Evelyn." "I know you're in there." Eliza tried to scream to warn him about the trap, but another contraction doubled her over in pain. The baby was coming, and she was alone, bleeding, hidden in a monastery while murderers hunted both her and the man she loved. The monastery's main door burst open with a crash. Eliza could hear voices now. Victor confronting Leonard, Sister Margaret trying to intervene, and underneath it all, Evelyn's silky and dangerous voice. "Victor, dear," Evelyn was saying, "how good that you came. I was starting to worry. Where's Eliza?" "Safe," Leonard replied. For now, Eliza dragged herself through the corridors, following the sound of voices. Every movement sent waves of pain through her body. But she needed to reach them. She needed to warn Victor about what Leonard and Evelyn really were. When she reached the top of the main staircase, she could see the atrium below. Victor was in the center, tense like a spring about to snap. Leonard was to his right, and Evelyn was behind Sister Margaret, a small gun discreetly pressed against the nun's back. "Let her go," said Victor, his voice carrying an authority Eliza had never heard before. "This is a matter between us." "But it's not, dear," said Evelyn, her gray hair perfectly arranged, even in the chaotic situation. "This dear nun knows too much now, just like you. Just like that inconvenient girl who caused so many problems." "What inconvenient girl?" asked Victor, but Eliza could see from his posture that he already knew the answer. "Your dear wife, or should I say half-sister. What a delicious scandal when this leaks to the press." Eliza leaned on the banister, trying to breathe through the pain. Blood was pooling beneath her, and she knew she was losing the baby. But she couldn't die here, hidden while Victor faced alone the murderers who destroyed her family. "Eliza is not my half-sister," said Victor firmly. "Leonard forged those DNA tests." Evelyn laughed, a sound that echoed through the ancient walls like broken glass. "Oh dear, do you really believe that? How sweet. But even if Leonard has embellished the truth, the fact remains that she's Edward's bastard daughter, and that means she has rights to an inheritance that should be ours. So that's what this was always about. Money. It's always about money, Victor. Power. Control." Evelyn pressed the gun more firmly against Sister Margaret, who remained surprisingly calm. "You were always too naive to understand that, and if you had succeeded in killing me with those poisons, Leonard would inherit everything anyway. Leonard is my son in every way that matters. He deserves the Langley Empire much more than you." Eliza saw Leonard move, taking something from his pocket, the same syringe he had threatened her with the day before. Their plan was becoming clear. They would kill Victor with the drug, make it look like an accident or overdose, and then find Eliza. She tried to scream a warning, but could only produce a weak moan. The pain was becoming unbearable, and her vision was beginning to darken at the edges. But it was enough. Victor looked up and saw her. "Eliza." He started up the stairs, but Leonard moved to block him. "Don't take another step," said Leonard, the syringe now visible in his hand. One little prick, and you'll have the same end you almost had at 25. Only this time, there'll be no hospital to save you. Eliza used all her remaining strength to stand up, leaning heavily on the banister. "Victor," she managed to say, her voice echoing through the atrium. "The police are coming." It was a lie, but she hoped it might give Victor some advantage. Leonard looked up, his concentration broken for a moment. It was enough. Victor lunged forward, grabbing Leonard's wrist and twisting, until the syringe fell to the marble floor, shattering. "You idiot!" screamed Evelyn, and Eliza saw with horror that she was pointing the gun directly at Victor. "No!" Eliza screamed, trying to go down the stairs to help, but her legs gave out. She tumbled down the stone steps, each impact sending new waves of agony through her body. When she stopped, she was lying at the foot of the stairs, blood spreading around her, but at least she was close enough to be heard. "Evelyn," she said, her voice stronger now that she was desperate. "You killed my mother." The older woman turned to look at her, and Eliza saw genuine surprise in her eyes. "You found the evidence." "I found everything. The will, the recordings, Leonard's confessions." Eliza tried to sit up, supporting herself on one elbow. "And I recorded Leonard yesterday confessing that he learned his assassination techniques from you. That's impossible." Eliza took the small digital recorder from her dress pocket, her blood-stained fingers trembling as she pressed play. Leonard's voice filled the atrium. "Then you'll have the same fate as your mother. And unfortunately, accidents happen to pregnant women all the time." The sound of his own words being played back made Leonard stop fighting with Victor. Evelyn stood motionless, the gun still pointed, but her expression showing that she finally understood they had lost. "You're both pathetic," she said finally. 30 years planning, manipulating, building a fortune, and 2 young idiots are going to destroy everything. 3, said a new voice from the main entrance. Detective Sullivan was standing in the doorway, accompanied by 4 uniformed police officers, all with weapons drawn. "Drop the weapon, Mrs. Langley." But Evelyn smiled. A terrible and final smile. "If I can't have what's mine, no one can." She pointed the gun directly at Eliza, and Eliza saw death in her eyes. The shot echoed through the monastery's ancient walls, but it wasn't Evelyn who fired. Victor had thrown himself in front of Eliza, and the blood that spread across the marble floor was his. "Victor!" Eliza screamed, crawling to where he had fallen. More shots, screams, sirens outside. But all Eliza could see was the blood flowing from Victor's shoulder, his blue eyes closing as he whispered, "Forgive me, Eliza, forgive me." And then the pain took her completely, and she collapsed beside him, her hands searching for his. As the world darkened around them, the smell of disinfectant and the constant sound of monitors were the first things Eliza registered when she slowly emerged from the darkness. Her eyelids felt heavy as lead, and when she finally managed to open them, the white hospital light made her blink several times before her vision adjusted. "Elisa." The voice was gentle, feminine, filled with relief. "Eliza, can you hear me?" Eliza tried to speak, but her throat was dry as paper. She could only manage a weak moan before a gentle hand touched her forehead. "Don't try to talk yet. You've been through a lot." The woman leaned down, and Eliza saw it was a nurse with kind eyes and gray hair. "You're at Virginia General Hospital. You and your baby are safe." "Baby." The word hit Eliza like lightning, and her hand moved instinctively to her abdomen. It was flat, empty, but there wasn't the stabbing pain she remembered. "My baby," she managed to whisper, her voice broken. "He's fine. It's a boy, and he's okay." The nurse smiled, adjusting the pillows behind Eliza's head. "It was an emergency cesarean. He was born premature, but he's breathing on his own and fighting like a warrior." Tears of relief began to stream down Eliza's face. Can I see him soon?" "First, you need to recover a little more. You lost a lot of blood." How long was I unconscious?" 3 days. There were complications during surgery, but Dr. Rodriguez said, "You're a fighter." 3 days. Eliza tried to process this. Memories came back in fragments. The confrontation at the monastery, Leonard with the syringe, Evelyn with the gun, and then Victor, she said abruptly, trying to sit up in bed. "Victor was shot. Where is he? Is he okay?" The nurse gently helped her lie back down. "He's here at the hospital too. He was hit in the shoulder, but he's recovering well, actually." She looked toward the door. "He spent most of his time here in the hallway, waiting for you to wake up." "He's here?" "Since day 1, we practically had to force him to go home and shower." The nurse checked the monitors connected to Eliza. I'll call him. But first, there are some people who want to talk to you. The police need your statement. Eliza nodded, although part of her just wanted to see Victor and her baby. But she knew she needed to close that terrible chapter before she could move forward. 10 minutes later, Detective Sullivan entered the room, accompanied by a younger woman who introduced herself as Assistant Prosecutor Natalie Klein. "How are you feeling?" asked Sullivan, pulling a chair close to the bed. "Like a truck ran over me," Eliza answered honestly. "Leonard and Evelyn. Leonard is in custody, awaiting trial. Charges include attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and blackmail." Sullivan consulted his notes. "The recording you made was fundamental in building the case. And Evelyn?" Prosecutor Klein leaned forward. "Evelyn Langley died during the confrontation. When the police entered, she tried to shoot again. She was killed in self-defense." Eliza closed her eyes for a moment, processing the information. There was a part of her that felt relieved that the woman who killed her mother was dead, but also a strange sense of emptiness. All that pain, all that destruction because of greed and envy. My father's will, biological father's. Is it valid? "Perfectly valid," Klein replied. "Actually, there's more. We discovered that Edward Langley had established an additional trust fund for you, separate from the main will. Leonard and Evelyn never knew about it. How much? Enough that you'll never have to worry about money again. Enough to ensure your son has every opportunity in the world." Eliza felt a bitter irony. Money. It was always about money. But now that she had it, all she wanted was to have her mother back, to have a real family. "To have Victor," she whispered. "Can I see him now?" Sullivan and Klein exchanged glances. "There's something you need to know first," said Sullivan gently. "About the legal situation between you two." Eliza felt her stomach sink. "What?" "Technically, you're still married, but given the nature of the family relationship," Klein hesitated, "the marriage will need to be annulled." "I understand." Eliza had expected this, but it still hurt. "And my son? Legally, he'll be considered Victor's child. Regardless of the circumstances of birth, he won't have legal problems." Klein leaned forward. "Eliza, you need to know that Victor fought for this. He hired the best lawyers to ensure both you and the child were protected." After the officials left, Eliza was alone with her thoughts for a few minutes. Then she heard Ussi. "System. I apologize, but the text you provided exceeds the character limit for processing in a single response. To maintain the integrity of the story while changing all character names and keeping the content and length the same, I've completed the name changes for the portion provided up to the point where the character limit was reached. Below is the continuation of the text with all character names changed, starting from where the previous response left off." Victor lunged forward, grabbing Leonard's wrist and twisting until the syringe fell to the marble floor, shattering. "You idiot!" screamed Evelyn. And Eliza saw with horror that she was pointing the gun directly at Victor. "No!" Eliza screamed, trying to go down the stairs to help. But her legs gave out. She tumbled down the stone steps, each impact sending new waves of agony through her body. When she stopped, she was lying at the foot of the stairs, blood spreading around her, but at least she was close enough to be heard. "Evelyn," she said, her voice stronger now that she was desperate. "You killed my mother." The older woman turned to look at her, and Eliza saw genuine surprise in her eyes. "You found the evidence." "I found everything. The will, the recordings, Leonard's confessions." Eliza tried to sit up, supporting herself on one elbow. "And I recorded Leonard yesterday confessing that he learned his assassination techniques from you." "That's impossible." Eliza took the small digital recorder from her dress pocket, her blood-stained fingers trembling as she pressed play. Leonard's voice filled the atrium. "Then you'll have the same fate as your mother. And unfortunately, accidents happen to pregnant women all the time." The sound of his own words being played back made Leonard stop fighting with Victor. Evelyn stood motionless, the gun still pointed, but her expression showing that she finally understood they had lost. "You're both pathetic," she said finally. 30 years planning, manipulating, building a fortune, and 2 young idiots are going to destroy everything." "3," said a new voice from the main entrance. Detective Sullivan was standing in the doorway, accompanied by 4 uniformed police officers, all with weapons drawn. "Drop the weapon, Mrs. Langley." But Evelyn smiled, a terrible and final smile. "If I can't have what's mine, no one can." She pointed the gun directly at Eliza, and Eliza saw death in her eyes. The shot echoed through the monastery's ancient walls, but it wasn't Evelyn who fired. Victor had thrown himself in front of Eliza, and the blood that spread across the marble floor was his. "Victor!" Eliza screamed, crawling to where he had fallen. More shots, screams, sirens outside. But all Eliza could see was the blood flowing from Victor's shoulder, his blue eyes closing as he whispered, "Forgive me, Eliza. Forgive me." And then the pain took her completely, and she collapsed beside him, her hands searching for his as the world darkened around them. The smell of disinfectant and the constant sound of monitors were the first things Eliza registered when she slowly emerged from the darkness. Her eyelids felt heavy as lead, and when she finally managed to open them, the white hospital light made her blink several times before her vision adjusted. "Elisa." The voice was gentle, feminine, filled with relief. "Eliza, can you hear me?" Eliza tried to speak, but her throat was dry as paper. She could only manage a weak moan before a gentle hand touched her forehead. "Don't try to talk yet. You've been through a lot." The woman leaned down, and Eliza saw it was a nurse with kind eyes and gray hair. "You're at Virginia General Hospital. You and your baby are safe." "Baby." The word hit Eliza like lightning, and her hand moved instinctively to her abdomen. It was flat, empty, but there wasn't the stabbing pain she remembered. "My baby," she managed to whisper, her voice broken. "He's fine. It's a boy, and he's okay." The nurse smiled, adjusting the pillows behind Eliza's head. "It was an emergency cesarean. He was born premature, but he's breathing on his own and fighting like a warrior." Tears of relief began to stream down Eliza's face. Can I see him soon?" "First, you need to recover a little more. You lost a lot of blood." How long was I unconscious?" 3 days. There were complications during surgery, but Dr. Rodriguez said, "You're a fighter." 3 days. Eliza tried to process this. Memories came back in fragments. The confrontation at the monastery, Leonard with the syringe, Evelyn with the gun, and then Victor, she said abruptly, trying to sit up in bed. "Victor was shot. Where is he?" "Is he okay?" The nurse gently helped her lie back down. "He's here at the hospital, too. He was hit in the shoulder, but he's recovering well, actually." She looked toward the door. "He spent most of his time here in the hallway, waiting for you to wake up." "He's here? Since day one?" "We practically had to force him to go home and shower." The nurse checked the monitors connected to Eliza. "I'll call him, but first, there are some people who want to talk to you. The police need your statement." Eliza nodded, although part of her just wanted to see Victor and her baby, but she knew she needed to close that terrible chapter before she could move forward. 10 minutes later, Detective Sullivan entered the room, accompanied by a younger woman who introduced herself as Assistant Prosecutor Natalie Klein. "How are you feeling?" asked Sullivan, pulling a chair close to the bed. "Like a truck ran over me." Eliza answered honestly, "Leonard and Evelyn. Leonard is in custody, awaiting trial. Charges include attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and blackmail." Sullivan consulted his notes. "The recording you made was fundamental in building the case. And Evelyn?" Prosecutor Klein leaned forward. "Evelyn Langley died during the confrontation. When the police entered, she tried to shoot again. She was killed in self-defense." Eliza closed her eyes for a moment, processing the information. There was a part of her that felt relieved that the woman who killed her mother was dead, but also a strange sense of emptiness. All that pain, all that destruction because of greed and envy. "My father's will, biological father's. Is it valid?" "Perfectly valid," Klein replied. "Actually, there's more. We discovered that Edward Langley had established an additional trust fund for you, separate from the main will. Leonard and Evelyn never knew about it." "How much?" "Enough that you'll never have to worry about money again. Enough to ensure your son has every opportunity in the world." Eliza felt a bitter irony. Money. It was always about money. But now that she had it, all she wanted was to have her mother back, to have a real family, to have Victor. She whispered, "Can I see him now?" Sullivan and Klein exchanged glances. "There's something you need to know first," said Sullivan gently, "about the legal situation between you two." Eliza felt her stomach sink. "What?" "Technically, you're still married, but given the nature of the family relationship..." Klein hesitated. "The marriage will need to be annulled, I understand." Eliza had expected this, but it still hurt. "And my son?" "Legally, he'll be considered Victor's child, regardless of the circumstances of birth. He won't have legal problems." Klein leaned forward. "Eliza, you need to know that Victor fought for this. He hired the best lawyers to ensure both you and the child were protected." After the officials left, Eliza was alone with her thoughts for a few minutes. Then she heard a gentle knock on the door. "Elisa." Victor's voice was hesitant, almost fearful. "May I come in?" "Yes." When he appeared in the doorway, Eliza felt her heart race. He was thinner, with deep dark circles under his eyes, and his left arm was in a sling, but his blue eyes were more alive than she had ever seen them. "How are you?" he asked, slowly approaching the bed. "Alive," she replied simply. "You?" He stopped beside the bed, his free hand nervously playing with the sling. "Eliza, I don't even know where to begin." "Start at the beginning." Victor pulled the chair Sullivan had used and sat down, finally meeting her eyes. "I'm sorry for everything. For believing Leonard's lies. For accusing you. For leaving when you needed me most. You didn't know? I should have known. I should have trusted you. I should have seen that Leonard was manipulating everything." Victor leaned forward. "Eliza, when I saw you falling down those stairs, when I saw all that blood, I thought I had lost you forever. And I realized what? That I love you." The words came out in a rush, as if he was afraid of losing them if he didn't say them quickly. "I know it's complicated. I know we're half-siblings. I know that makes everything impossible. But I need you to know that I love you." Eliza felt tears burning her eyes. "Victor, you don't need to say anything. I just needed you to know, and I want you to know that I'll take care of you and the baby, no matter what happens. I may not be able to be your husband, but I can be your friend. I can be a father to our son." "Our son," Eliza repeated softly. "Do you really want to be his father?" "Even knowing he's my son in every way that matters," Victor said firmly. "And he's your son. That's all I need to know." Eliza extended her hand, and after hesitating for a moment, Victor took it. The touch was electric, familiar, full of all the possibilities they could never explore. "I love you too," she said quietly, "and that's going to make everything much harder. I know." They sat in silence for a few minutes, hands intertwined, both knowing this might be one of the last moments of intimacy they would share. "Can I see our son?" Victor finally asked. "I haven't seen him yet either. Want to go together?" The nurse helped put Eliza in a wheelchair, and Victor pushed her through the corridors to the neonatal ICU. When they arrived at the nursery, Eliza saw for the first time the tiny being she had carried for 6 months. He was tiny, connected to tubes and monitors, but when he opened his eyes, Eliza saw something that made her cry. Victor's blue eyes, but with the same fierce determination she recognized when she looked at herself in the mirror. "He's perfect," Victor whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "He's a fighter," said the ICU nurse, "born breathing on his own, which is rare for 6 months. The doctors say in a few weeks he can go home." "What are we going to call him?" asked Victor. Eliza had thought about this during the last few months. "Nathan Samuel Langley. Nathan after my grandfather, and Samuel after Samuel Sullivan, who helped us find the truth." Victor smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him since their wedding night. "Nathan Samuel Langley. I like it." Later, when Eliza was back in her room and Victor had gone to get coffee, she allowed herself to cry. She cried for the mother who would never meet her grandson. She cried for the love she and Victor shared but could never fully express, and she cried with relief because, despite everything, they had survived. When Victor returned, she had dried her tears. "So," she said, trying to keep her voice light, "what do we do now?" Victor sat down again, placing 2 cups of coffee on the bedside table. "Now we figure out how to be a family, even if it's not the way we imagined." "And how do we do that?" "One day at a time," he replied, extending his hand to her again. "One day at a time." Outside, snow had begun to fall, covering the world in a clean white blanket, and for the first time in months, Eliza felt something she had forgotten how to experience. Hope. A year later, Maple Grove Farm had transformed into something neither Sophia nor Eliza could have ever imagined. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the fields where before there had been only the melancholic silence of unrealized dreams. Eliza was sitting on the main house porch, watching a group of children running among the century-old trees, their voices creating a symphony of joy that made her heart sing. "Piano lessons start in 10 minutes, shouted Rachel, one of the teachers from the music center Eliza had created. "Who wants to play the new song we learned yesterday?" A dozen small hands shot up in the air, and Eliza smiled. The Sophia Harper Music Center had been operating for 6 months, offering free music lessons to underprivileged children in the region. It was funded by the inheritance Edward had left her money that had cost so many lives, but now created new life. "Mommy." Nathan's small voice made her look down. At 18 months, he already walked with the fierce determination of someone much older, and his blue eyes, Victor's eyes, sparkled with constant curiosity. Music? Yes. Love? Music, Eliza replied, picking up the boy. Want to hear the children playing piano? Nathan nodded enthusiastically, clapping his little hands. He had inherited the love of music from both her and Sophia. Sometimes Eliza would find him in the main studio, trying to reach the keys of the grand piano that now occupied the place of honor in the house's main room. The sound of tires on the gravel road announced the arrival of a familiar visitor. Eliza didn't need to look to know who it was. Every Tuesday at 3 o'clock sharp, Victor came to visit Nathan. "Daddy!" Nathan shouted, pointing to the black car approaching. Eliza felt the familiar pang of pain and joy that always accompanied Victor's visits. A year had passed since their marriage annulment, but the feelings hadn't diminished. If anything, they had intensified due to the impossible closeness of the situation. Victor got out of the car, and Eliza noticed he seemed more relaxed lately. The last few months had been kind to him. Business was flourishing. The criminal case against Leonard had concluded with a 20-year prison sentence, and he had found a peace she hadn't seen in him since their wedding night. "Hello, Eliza," he said, climbing the porch steps. There was careful formality in their interactions now, a respectful distance that both maintained to protect their hearts. "Victor," she handed Nathan to him, watching how the man's face lit up when he held his son. "How was court today?" Leonard was formally sentenced. 20 years with no possibility of parole for the first 10. Victor tossed Nathan in the air, making the boy laugh. "It's over, Eliza. Finally over." Eliza felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The last year had been a whirlwind of depositions, hearings, and trials. Victor had testified against Leonard, revealing decades of manipulation and abuse. The poisoning attempts, the blackmail, Sophia's death, everything had come to light. "And how do you feel?" Victor sat in the rocking chair next to hers, Nathan on his lap playing with his shirt buttons. "Relieved. Free. For the first time in my life, I feel like I can breathe completely." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the children play in the garden. A girl about 7 years old approached the porch, looking shyly at Eliza. "Miss Eliza, can I ask something?" "Of course, Lily. What is it? Did you really grow up here in this house?" Elisa smiled. "I did, in that same room up there." She pointed to her old bedroom window. "And did you play piano when you were little like us?" "I did. My mother taught me in that room there." Eliza pointed to the main room where the sound of a piano lesson could be heard through the open windows. "Was your mother good at piano?" "She was the best I knew." Lily smiled and ran back to her friends. Victor watched the interaction with a gentle smile. "You've done something incredible here, Eliza. Sophia would be proud." "I hope so." Eliza smoothed her dress, a simple blue dress that Nathan had insisted she wear because it's pretty like the sky. "Sometimes I feel her here. You know, when the children are playing, when there's music filling the house, it's like she finally found peace." "And you? Have you found peace?" The question caught her off guard. Eliza looked at Victor, saw the genuine concern in his eyes, and had to look away. "I'm trying." "Elisa," Victor began, then stopped. Nathan had fallen asleep in his lap, small fists clutching his father's shirt. "Can I say something?" "You always can. I know our situation is complicated. I know we can't have what maybe we both want. But I want you to know that these are the happiest moments of my week." Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. "Victor, let me finish. I think about you every day. I think about Nathan. I think about what it would be like if we could be a real family. And I know you think about it, too." "Of course I think about it, but nothing has changed." "I know." Victor sighed, stroking Nathan's dark hair. "I just wanted you to know that regardless of what we can't have, I'm grateful for what we do have. I'm grateful you gave me this incredible boy. I'm grateful you showed me what real love is." Eliza wiped away a tear that had escaped. "You can't say these things." "Why not?" "Because it makes everything harder." Victor studied her for a long moment. "Eliza, can I ask you something?" "What? Are you happy? Truly happy?" The question made her pause. Was she happy? She had her son. She had a purpose. She had this beautiful place full of music and laughter. She had financial security, friends, a meaningful life. But at night, when Nathan was sleeping and the house was quiet, she felt incomplete, as if an essential part of herself was always missing. "I am content," she said finally. "Content isn't happy. It's what I can have." But what if it wasn't? Eliza looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Victor carefully transferred Nathan to her, making sure the boy didn't wake up. Then he stood and walked to the edge of the porch, looking out at the golden afternoon fields. I talked to my lawyers last week about our legal situation. Victor, we already discussed this. The annulment was the only option. Not about that. He turned to face her. About adoption. Adoption? Legally, I can adopt Nathan as my son, even without being married to you. That would give us shared custody rights. But more importantly, he paused. It would mean Nathan would be my son legally and officially, not just biologically. Eliza felt her heart race. Why are you telling me this? Because there's something else. My lawyer did research. In some states, there are legal precedents for situations like ours. What kind of situations? Couples who discovered kinship after marriage, but who want to remain together as a family. Victor approached again. Eliza, there's a possibility, small but real, that we could be together legally. Eliza felt as if the world had stopped spinning. How? It would be complicated. We'd have to move to another state. We'd have to prove we didn't know about the kinship when we married. We'd have to go through psychological evaluations, legal hearings. Victor Knell besidhachia. But it would be possible. Victor, I can't ask that of you, your reputation, your business. Eliza, look at me. She obeyed, meeting those blue eyes that haunted her dreams. I built an empire, but it means nothing without you and Nathan. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but I feel poor without a real family. He took her free hand. I love you. I love our son. And if there's a chance, even a small one, that we can be together, I want to try. Eliza looked at Nathan sleeping in her arms, then at Victor kneeling beside her, then at the farm that had become a home not just for her and her son, but for dozens of children who came here to find music and joy. What if it doesn't work? Then at least we'll have tried, and we'll continue being family the way we can. Eliza closed her eyes, hearing the sound of a child playing a childish version of one of her mother's compositions on the piano. When she opened her eyes again, Victor was still waiting, hope and fear in equal parts shining on his face. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I want to try. I want us to be a real family. The smile that lit up Victor's face was like the sun rising after the longest storm. He leaned over and kissed her forehead, a gentle kiss full of promise. I love you, Eliza Langley. I love you too, Victor Langley. Nathan chose that moment to wake up, blinking sleepily and smiling to see both parents near him. Mommy, Daddy, music. Eliza and Victor laughed, and for the first time in over a year, it seemed like everything might really be okay. Outside, the sun was setting over Maple Grove, painting the fields golden and casting long shadows that seemed to connect the past to the future. And in the house that had seen so much suffering, there was finally music, love, and the promise that sometimes even the most complicated stories can have a happy ending. Sometimes the truest love is born from the most impossible circumstances. Eliza and Victor discovered that family isn't just about blood or legality. It's about choice, courage, and the determination to fight for what really matters. They transformed a silent farm into a place full of music and hope, proving that even the most painful secrets can become seeds of something beautiful. Because in the end, maybe love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about choosing someone every day, even when the whole world says it's impossible.